We'll start with a presentation by Veronica and McCauley and Flynn, both from National University of Ireland, Galway, and those active in the field of science education or closely related fields. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be here in person, as well as to speaking to those who are online. The title of our paper is A Pedagogical Pathway to Enhance Science Identity in Disadvantaged Males. Just a little bit about ourselves and who we are. Both Veronica and I manage and work at the Centre for Pedagogy and Public Engagement Research at the School of Education, or COPPER, as we refer to it. And we're both lecturers and researchers in the School of Education at the National University of Ireland, Galway. And COPPER was established 2 years ago as a research centre in our university to specialise in research in formal and non-formal education. We saw a gap in a need in the academic community, and particularly the outreach community, for help in that sector. We're located on the western periphery of Europe, and we currently work across 10 national EU projects and work with a research team of 7. But to our project is called It's Not Just Science. And for some, science is often viewed stereotypically as lab-based, perhaps with units, different devices and mechanisms, different apparatus mounted on very clean-cut, white, boxed units, and often very managed by somebody in an authoritarian position. But when we talk about perception and reality, we consider that science is so much more than that. This project, It's Not Just Science, sets out to use science as a key that opens the door for disadvantaged males in particular into higher education. And we aim to achieve this by providing opportunities to develop science identity, which we consider to be critical, particularly when dealing with disadvantaged males at secondary school or second level education. But before we talk about science identity, and my colleague Veronica will talk more about science identity than I, we want to maybe ask 2 questions that are important, and that's why disadvantaged males and why higher education. In Ireland in particular, disadvantaged males have challenges accessing higher education, and males from socioeconomic disadvantaged communities often underperform on science achievements tests relative to mainstream school cohorts, and do not see themselves as capable in science or of being a scientist. In fact, the general education population, the ratio of female participation to males in science education is 2 to 1. However, if we look at the socioeconomically disadvantaged ratio, it's 3 to 1. And so there's a clear deficit there or need for innovation. Intersecting literature suggests that increasing student science identity has the potential to interrupt this pattern. And thus this paper considers a suite of teaching strategies designed as a pedagogical pathway to support enhancing male science identity with biology. This ratio is also backed up by subject selection at senior cycle, or the upper tier of secondary school education in Ireland, where there are a number of different science subjects offered for examination. However, high-pressured, high-stakes examination and early subject and career choice, it has become evident through the participation and sitting of exams that in socially disadvantaged schools, less and less males are opting for the biological sciences. Just a little bit on science identity and self-concept. Students' attitudes towards science subjects are generally mixed. Young people are exposed to competing images that form their personal understanding of what a scientist is and who can be a scientist, and begin to align their identity with those norms. Is it an older white male in a lab coat, or a very younger and female STEM scientist? And as noted by previous speakers, indeed the moderator for the session, social forces play a strong role in determining the requirements for participation, resulting in students balancing indeed their own aspirations and interests with the expectations imposed on them by their peers, families, and teachers. And so there are many different forces that act on the decision-making process or the formation of what we might call science identity and self-concept. Indeed, as students get older, they begin to refine in themselves what it means to be a person who is successful in science and whether or not they belong. Some students begin to feel they do not identify as a science person because they do not align with the expectations of a good or brainy student. Archer et al. In 2016 found that white male students from families with higher earnings, connection and experience in a science-related industry felt the most confident in science subjects, receiving encouragement by teachers. They were streamed into more rigorous classes and received greater career guidance because they were seen as sufficiently clever. Girls, students of color, and students from families with lower incomes participate in higher level science classes in secondary school in far fewer numbers, despite having strong interest, support from their family, and personally valuing science learning. Indeed, biological sciences are prominent across higher education offerings in Ireland. And if you look at the smart specialisation strategy put forward by the European Union, it is a key area for Ireland's economic development. But students who do not take biology at second level education, this can lead to a resulting impediment to progressing to higher education. It can lead to opportunities or decline in opportunities to access financially rewarding positions, and above all, to contribute to a sustainable and healthy engagement with society more broadly. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Veronica McCauley, who will take the next slide.
Thank you, Paul. So as Paul has just shared, the problem that we are targeting in this project, it's not just science, looks at the issue that if socioeconomic disadvantaged males do not opt for biology in secondary school, then they're excluded from a biology pathway into higher education. So we looked at theoretical solutions, and the scholarship tells us that we need to improve the science identity of these disadvantaged males. And there are a number of different conceptual solutions out there, but the three that we focused in on because of our particular target group are integrated teaching, scientific inquiry in terms of experimental science and problem solving, and then free choice learning. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about each of those now. So in terms of improving science identity through integrated teaching, the starting point is everyday lived experience of students, because that, as we all know, provides a sort of a strong foundation for the teaching of any abstract concept. And then in terms of identity work, a lot of young males in this particular target group do not identify with biology, and perhaps physics or history or some other subject is their topic of interest. So that's why it's so important to explore how different disciplines are related and used together to solve problems. And then interestingly, this blending of disciplines has been shown to interrupt science self-concept trends or science identity. And in particular, the promotion, Jansen's work talks about the promotion of participation in biology for male students when integrated teaching happens. So in summary, it's to start from everyday lived experience of students, and the blended science discipline teaching approach, those two things together, we hope will result in enhanced self-identity in biology for males. Just to point out that a recent study in Irish science teaching found that even though interdisciplinary methods are encouraged, they're not as common as we'd like. So we will take that into account as our research progresses. Then in terms of scientific inquiry and how science identity can be influenced by that, well, student-led science learning that incorporates inquiry and problem solving can lead to increased relevancy and authenticity in terms of learning science. Students are encouraged to experiment and make mistakes. So it's part of daily life. You know, it's okay to make mistakes in science, and that's what it's about. That there might not be one single correct answer. Inquiry-based learning has also shown to motivate and engage learners who are low achieving or come from less privileged backgrounds. So in summary, in terms of inquiry learning, it's about student-led inquiry and problem solving, as this can lead to relevant learning and authentic learning in science. And then in terms of the scientific approach, where we really are going to champion that trial and error is welcome. The intention is that we will motivate and engage low achieving, less privileged learners. We're hopeful about this because in Ireland at the moment, there's quite a large push in terms of inquiry learning. It's come in quite strongly in the lower secondary education system, and there's a new curricula at the minute that's being put forward for 2023, and it's going to form quite a strong component in that as well. And lastly, free choice learning and about how science identity can be influenced by that. Children from low socioeconomic status households are much less likely to experience informal science learning. And if students do not see the connection to their lives, if there's no relevancy, then they're less likely to opt for a career in science. Studies show that informal science education is particularly impactful for students who don't feel that they belong in science, which is why we're going to try to fold this again into our intervention. This choice and exploration in less formal settings is vitally important to motivation, improves understanding, and significantly contributes to lasting science knowledge. So in summary, informal science with free choice learning and life relevancy for these students, we hope will motivate their learning and produce an enduring science knowledge, in particular for those who don't feel that they belong. So we will work with schools to forge partnerships with the community and invite in informal science learning opportunities to the school, and vice versa, also invite the school to move out into the community and partake in informal science opportunities. So just to summarize it up, the project problem is about working with socioeconomic disadvantaged males and looking at a pathway through biology into higher education. We want to work on improving their science identity, and our conceptual framework that we've come together is going to include elements of integrated teaching, scientific inquiry, and free choice learning. Next steps, this summer, we're hoping to start with a design-based research project. We'll trial this conceptual framework and hopefully produce some actionable knowledge that we can come back and talk with you about this time next year. So that's it. Thank you so much.